aspect of putting together a diverse sample cache.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, one more social media question. I know we don't have a helicopter team member up on stage with us here, but I'm hoping someone might be able to answer because everyone's interested in ingenuity as well. Chris on Facebook asks, how many sols until the helicopter flights, and does it have a camera and sensors to record the flight? Pauline, is that something you can take?
Yeah, I can take the number of sols. Yeah, and so I should caveat, right? Like it depends a lot what happens on Mars, but I think the earliest we are estimating that we could begin helicopter flights specifically, because there's actually a series of things we have to do with the helicopter before it can even start flying. So if you're actually asking specifically about the helicopter flights, it won't be until about Sol 60, and maybe a little bit earlier if we're super fast. Let me just, and I just want to emphasize kind of the journey that we would have to get there. So like we mentioned, we're going to transition to our surface flight software. We're going to finish a series of other checkouts on our new surface flight software. Once that's done, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drive to the next location, and we actually want to find a habitable environment for the helicopter to fly in. We call it the helipad location. So we don't know how many sols it's going to take. However, based on what we're landing, we're already starting to look at that data. There might be some really good, what we call helipad locations nearby for us to find. So it might not actually take us very long to drive there, but that's still work to go to figure that out. And that's why there's a lot of uncertainty. And I was going to mention about the weather observations that the 10-year-old on the social media was asking. It doesn't really affect the samples, and Katie was absolutely right about that. I was just going to add that the helicopter team's highly interested in the weather data for, well, not only for their helicopter flights, but also before we do their drop. Right now, they're attached beneath the rover, as hopefully everyone knows, and we actually have to do what we call the helicopter deployment, where we drop them off and then we drive away. And so that's a highly critical event, first time on Mars, and we're putting all hands on deck on that one and doing several practice sessions and everything. So that one we are, looking at the weather data actively for the drop-off and also for the flights. So, and then Adam, why don't you talk to the helicopter capabilities?
Yes, the helicopter does have the capacity to take color images and even color video. And beam that back to the rover, and then the rover back to Earth. That's part of the extra data that it can take. Again, we're bandwidth limited, so the first stuff that will come down from the helicopter will be engineering data.
And I understand, Adam, that the rover can take images of the helicopter.
Yes, of course.
Which might be the best of all.
Yes, but both. The rover certainly will be imaging the helicopter as the helicopter spools up its rotors, does its checkout. We'll actually have some video of that available to us. And then we will we'll watch, do our best to watch from the rover the helicopter's flights. And then the helicopter itself also has the cameras mentioned.
Okay. Moving back to the phone line, we'll go to Jackie Goddard of Times of London.
Hello, and congratulations on those pictures. My question's for Adam. I don't know how you got through your intro to that rover landing picture there so calmly, because it's epic. Certainly gave me chills. So many people kind of just carried on with their lives yesterday, unaware of what is going on Mars. And I wonder, how do you explain to people the sheer significance and awesomeness of that picture and this landing, and what you're going to be getting up to on Mars? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I mentioned earlier that these things are hard. There's no doubt about that. It takes hundreds, thousands of people, years of effort. And insofar as it is that difficult, it represents a huge human lift to make this happen. So that image and the details therein really pull us humans here on Earth into the result of all of that hard work. You are brought into the surface of Mars. You're sitting there, 7 meters off the surface of the rover, looking down. I mean, I don't know if you can see this. I can. The plumes are hitting the surface of Mars, kicking up little wisps of dust. You can see on the upper right of the upper left of the image and the lower right of the image, you can see these little dust plumes in that on the surface of Mars, kicked up by our engines. So it's exhilarating. It is absolutely exhilarating, and it is evocative of those other images from our experience as human beings moving out into our solar system. Those images that bring us into the process of our exploration. And I'm so happy that we can contribute another to that collection.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go next to Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Thanks very much. I have two questions. The first for Adam: how much more mass could this EDL system accommodate? Is it at its max now?
So it's an interesting question. That's a question spacecraft designers have been asking for years. And unfortunately for the EDL system designers, the answer is fairly elastic. There's always a little bit more to give. We worry a little bit about being frogs in hot water and not noticing our proteins denaturing, that the water's getting too hot for us. But there is, in our EDL system here, probably some more room to be given. And with the next expeditions, we will always be carefully monitoring the risks we take on as we look to expand the performance of our entry, descent, and landing systems.
Thanks, and I'm not sure who would be best to answer this question, but I was curious how the selection of the helipad will be made. Is that going to be primarily with mass cam images once that system's operational, or what other tools are available to make that call?
Most of it will actually be using the engineering camera data. So that will be sufficient to determine the helipad imaging. And so once we get the stereo data, as we say it, we actually have some team members on the helicopter team that will be looking at that data and looking for the right helipads. And they'll be working together with science so that we can come up with a common path between science and helicopter to arrive at the right parking lot location. And once we get there, we're actually going to drive the rover around and kind of take a series of high-res stereo imaging all around and then do another assessment. So then that's mostly with engineering cameras, but we will absolutely do, high-res mass cam imaging too, but really what we just need to make the assessment is the engineering camera data, so.
Thanks. And what's the earliest that the rover would make its first drive?
I missed the beginning part. What was
What's the earliest? How many days before the rover, at the earliest, would drive?
So we're anticipating right now the earliest the rover would drive is, if I remember correctly, was be Sol 8 or 9. I think it's Sol 9, if I remember correctly, is our current best estimate. And keep in mind that probably the first drive will be maybe a short drive just to check everything out, and then we'll do a longer drive after that. But in the meantime, we're also going to be trying to figure out the route and direction we need to go. So.
Thanks very much.
Okay, next on the phone lines, we have Tony Cabrera with ABC7. Go ahead.
Hi, my question's about the celebration last night, with just how incredible, exhilarating you all described it. You said the team went wild, but how about once everybody got home? Was there champagne with loved ones? I mean, could you sleep? Were you just on your phone looking at everything? What was that like?
Well, maybe we should go. I'd love us to go and get everybody on here, because every team member, especially in this COVID time, has kind of a different experience of the celebration. I can tell you that we had a chief engineer's happy hour at 5:30 p.m. last evening, and that is, as it has been since the time of COVID, a virtual event via Zoom. And we had a huge collection of the team that was not currently working issues on the surface present, but we were all in our homes individually, and speaking to one another over the internet.
And I can, just to add on to that, I can also say that there was a socially distanced consumption of ice cream outdoors shortly after the landing. with some of the members of the team. After we dispersed and went to our own homes, I'm sure a lot of us had a chance to sleep better than we have in recent past.
Yeah, and for the surface team, it actually is just beginning for us. So on some level, we landed, and then we basically was, game on for us, actually. So a lot of us were working well into the evening. I think most of us were there around till at least 10 p.m. last night, and it was exhilarating because we were getting all this great data and seeing all this amazing details. And I would add for that, the surface team, half the team is remote and half the team is present at JPL. So, we're also constantly contacting our counterparts that are remote and showing them the images that we're seeing, what we call, via our WebEx screens. And I think, for me personally, I went home and just passed out from just the excitement of the day. It was a very long day for Surface yesterday, and we've been telling the team to make sure to get their rest because it's just beginning for us, and to make sure they get their rest time. But I imagine in the coming days, I'll definitely be having a glass of wine in celebration for everything. So
yeah, as Pauline had mentioned, some of us are remote. So our image and data processing team is fully remote right now, working from their houses, mostly in Los Angeles, some out of state. And it was super exciting because, again, when we land, image team, this is our time to shine. This is now we're on for the next however many hours. And, the next 5 days, we're working 2 shifts a day, almost about 20 hours a day. So when we had our first shift yesterday, everybody who was supposed to be working overnight, of course, wanted to be involved and was so excited to see these first images come down throughout and late into the night, hoping that they would then get a nap before then they're on as they continued to do their image and data processing over the evening. It is kind of a really cool thing to actually be on a WebEx with everybody's video on and during these COVID times because, typically we're having to spread out, but it felt like we were all kind of there in a way. And we really made the best of it, and it was a really cool celebration with everybody being able to share the images as they were coming down live through the evening. So it was really incredible.
Yeah, and for us in the science team, our entire science team is remote, and we have scientists ranging from Australia to Europe, and so everyone is on a different time zone. Some people were just getting ready to go to bed, other people were waking up. And that's kind of business as usual for a science team working on a Mars rover. And so we, as Pauline and Hallie have said, we had to get to work. And so many of us scientists followed along with the first planning cycle for Perseverance. And we had our very first post-landing science discussion. And this felt like such a big moment for us. We've been meeting together as a science team for years and dreaming about our post-landing activities. And here we were on the surface with the rover, having our first discussion about science on the surface of Mars with real images. And so it was a great feeling, and we are going to continue that for many days to come.
Okay, we're going to go a bit into lightning round now because we only have about 5 minutes left. We do have to end this briefing right at 11. So we're going to take a few questions here, and if we don't get to your question, please call the Media Relations Office at JPL, and we'll ask if you guys can stay after a little bit, and we'll do those questions by phone. But next up, we'll go to Amina Khan with the LA Times.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. Katie, on that point, it would be great to be a virtual fly on the wall in these science discussions. And I know there's so many different scientists, hundreds with different goals and different favorite targets. What are some of the, I guess I would call them friendly arguments happening among science team members about which target they should go to first and why? What are some of the compelling and competing arguments they're making for their targets of choice?
Yes, well, we've only just started this process, and really we got these first images down last night, and so the discussions are just beginning. And this is a period of time which is really great because I think the scientists feel very free to share their first thoughts and interpretations. And so, people throw out some wild guesses, and that is great, and that's exactly what we need to be doing as we're trying to figure out what it is we're looking at. And what the science team will transition while the rover is updating its flight software, which Pauline was mentioning. The science team is going to have a special meeting to talk about some of these things for the first time and say, okay, where is our next location that we want to drive to when the rover is checked out? And what is that location where we want to dig in and really use the rover's instruments? And so the science team is about to engage in that conversation. And we haven't had it yet, but we'll have it in the next couple of days with the idea that in about a week or so, we'll have consensus on where we want the rover to drive and what direction we want it to drive in. And so, of course, everyone, as you say, everyone has their own opinions and own perspectives, and it's really great to get those out into the forum of the science team. But many of us have done this before, and somehow we're able to get a 450 person science team in the same direction. And so that's one of our tasks that we have in the coming week.
Are there any examples of prime targets that, I know it's still early, but are there anything that have struck your fancy?
Well, yes. So as I mentioned, we landed right next to this very important geologic contact. And so I think one of the first decisions that the science team is going to have to make is where along this contact do we think we'll have the best exposure of rocks to make our first really detailed investigations. And so we'll be looking closely at the orbiter images and the images we have on the ground to try to identify that location along this contact.
Thank you so much.
All right, I want to thank everyone who came here today to give us taking the time away. And I know some of you on Mars time and crazy schedules. Thank you for being with us. We do need to wrap right now. If we didn't get to your question, we apologize, but please do call our office and we will get you set up to do a phone interview. Want to remind everybody that we'll be back on Monday, February 22nd, with another news conference that will take place at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And between now and then, you can always follow the mission by going to, there we go, go.nasa.gov/Mars 2020 toolkit. On that site, you will find all the latest news about the mission. You'll also find loads of fun features there, including a Mars photo booth and also a way to send your name to Mars on our next mission. Thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone have a great day on Earth and on Mars.